Have you ever wondered why a man can so easily admire a woman's beauty, indulge in her charm, or even crave her touch, yet trembles in quiet fear when she embodies emotional sovereignty? The answer lies not in superficial attraction, but in the invisible underworld of the psyche, where archetypes, shadows, and unconscious wounds silently wrestle for dominance. A woman who is emotionally sovereign cannot be owned. She cannot be bent by the fragile ego or chained by promises of temporary affection. Her worth is not weighed against his validation, nor does she hunger for scraps of his recognition. And this unsettles him, because such a woman does not play in the realm of dependency. She rises above the predictable scripts that many men have relied on to control intimacy. To face her is to face himself, naked, unmasked, and confronted with his own insufficiency. Carl Jung once said that what we resist not only persists but grows stronger. A man fears the woman who resists nothing within herself, for she has walked into her own darkness and returned with treasures. She has met her shadow, the hidden impulses of jealousy, neediness, and longing, and instead of letting them rule her, she has integrated them into her wholeness. She does not hide from her wounds, nor does she seek a man to stitch them together. She is not the echo of his desires, she is the voice of her own truth. And here lies the paradox. Men crave this strength even as it terrifies them. They are drawn to her light, but the closer they come, the more they sense that their old tricks, the power games, the silent withdrawals, the breadcrumbs of affection, simply disintegrate in her presence. She does not chase. She does not cling. When he withdraws, she does not collapse. She expands. When he offers crumbs, she refuses the table altogether. He cannot feed his ego with her hunger because she hungers only for authenticity. Imagine what this does to him. For years, perhaps even for lifetimes, men have been conditioned to see women as mirrors of their power. If she admires him, he feels strong. If she obeys, he feels dominant. If she collapses at his absence, he feels important. But when a woman does none of these things, when she is whole without him, the illusion begins to crumble. He realizes that his worth is not inherently tied to her reactions, and this is terrifying, because it forces him to question who he is when he cannot control the reflection staring back at him. You see, the emotionally sovereign woman is not cruel. She is not distant because of disdain. She is distant because she has learned that boundaries are the sacred architecture of self-respect. She does not allow chaos to invade her temple. She has discovered that her peace is not negotiable. And when a man stands before such a temple, he either rises to meet her in reverence or retreats in fear of his own smallness. The Stoics knew this truth well. Marcus Aurelius wrote that the happiness of your life depends upon the quality of your thoughts. The sovereign woman lives this. She does not let her joy dangle on the strings of another's approval. She cultivates a garden of stillness within herself, where no abandonment, no betrayal, no silence can uproot her essence. And when a man enters this garden, he knows instinctively, if he tramples carelessly, he will lose her. If he fails to honor her depth, she will vanish without bitterness, without spectacle, without begging. That quiet leaving, that dignified refusal to participate in games, is what he fears most. For it is not the storm that terrifies him, but the calm of a woman who does not need him, who will not barter her soul for his affection. She may love deeply, but her love is a gift, not a transaction. It cannot be bought with empty promises or secured by manipulation. It is free and therefore untouchable. When he encounters her, he faces the reflection of his own shadow, the places where he has not grown, where he still depends on control, where he still avoids his own pain. She does not absorb his chaos. She holds up a mirror, and what he sees there may unravel him. He wants to conquer her, but finds he can only conquer himself. He wants to possess her, but finds she cannot be possessed. He wants her to kneel, but finds she only rises. And so the fear grows, for deep down he knows that she does not play by his unconscious rules. She has rewritten the game entirely. She has stepped into a power that no seduction, no threat of withdrawal, no test of loyalty can dismantle. She has touched the eternal within herself, This is why he fears her, not because she is cruel, not because she is indifferent, but because she is free. He begins to sense something that disturbs him in ways he cannot articulate. The emotionally sovereign woman exists outside the reach of his performance. She is not hypnotized by his titles, his wealth, or his fleeting gestures of affection. Where others might bend, she stands. Where others collapse into despair, she holds her own stillness like a fortress. And it is in this unwavering posture that he recognizes his own dependency. Because the man who fears her is not afraid of her strength itself, he is afraid of the mirror that her strength holds up to his weakness. Carl Jung taught that every human carries both the anima and the animus with it. The inner feminine in men and the inner masculine in women. For a man who has neglected his anima, who has silenced the feminine voice within his own psyche, the sovereign woman becomes a living embodiment of everything he has denied. Her intuitive calm, her refusal to collapse into need, her ability to hold both light and shadow without shame. These qualities awaken the feminine archetype he has long exiled, and instead of embracing it, he feels threatened. He projects his unresolved fears onto her, imagining her as cold, unattainable, or even dangerous, when in truth, she is simply whole. You must understand, the male ego does not fear beauty, it does not fear kindness. What it fears is the power of detachment, because detachment is the death of control. The man who thrives on domination cannot thrive where his absence is met with silence rather than desperation. When she does not chase him, he is stripped of the illusion that he is indispensable, and if he is not indispensable, then he is forced to confront the raw question, who is he without her need for him? For centuries, women were conditioned to collapse under abandonment, to equate absence with unworthiness, to believe that silence meant punishment. But the sovereign woman has broken that chain. She has learned that absence is not a punishment but a revelation. She has walked through the fires of solitude and discovered that loneliness is not death, it is birth. She has come out on the other side, knowing that her wholeness was never dependent on another's return, and this revelation is what terrifies him most. Imagine this, a man withdraws, expecting the familiar cycle, her pleading, her questioning, her emotional unraveling. But instead she responds with stillness. She lets him go, not out of pride, but because she refuses to betray herself for crumbs. He waits for the storm, but no storm comes. He listens for the sound of her collapse, but hears only silence. And in that silence, he is confronted with the most unsettling truth. She does not need him to survive. This is where fear takes root, because dependency is the soil where control grows. Without dependency, his old weapons lose their edge. Gaslighting cannot touch her clarity. Breadcrumbing cannot starve her, for she feasts on her own self-worth. Emotional manipulation falls flat, for she recognizes the pattern and refuses to participate. He is not facing a woman who will be broken by the game. He is facing a woman who no longer plays it. The Stoics would call this the highest freedom, the ability to remain undisturbed by what lies outside one's control. Epictetus said, "No man is free who is not master of himself." The sovereign woman embodies this truth. She does not allow her joy to hinge on another's presence. She does not let her peace be stolen by another's chaos. She knows that everything external is fleeting, that the only permanence lies within, and in this mastery she becomes untouchable. But untouchable does not mean unloving. She is not a cold figure carved of stone. She feels deeply, perhaps more deeply than anyone else. The difference is that she feels without drowning, loves without losing herself, and grieves without surrendering her dignity. Her love is a conscious choice, not a desperate need. Her presence is a gift, not a bargaining chip. To love such a woman is to step into a crucible. For the man who dares to meet her, he must first confront himself. He must face his shadow, integrate his anima, and release the childish desire to control what he does not understand. He must learn that love is not possession, but participation, and this terrifies him, because true intimacy requires the death of ego. Yet still, he is drawn. He returns again and again to her flame, even when it scorches his illusions, because on some unconscious level he knows that she holds the key not only to his longing but to his growth. She awakens him even as he resists. And, though fear may pull him back, fascination pushes him forward, for in her sovereignty he glimpses the possibility of his own. The deeper he looks, the more he realizes that her presence forces him to wrestle with truths he has long avoided. The emotionally sovereign woman does not validate the narratives he has built to protect his fragility. She does not confirm his belief that control equals love, that silence equals power, that withdrawal creates desire. Instead, she dismantles those illusions by refusing to participate in them, and this refusal is more piercing than any rejection, for she is not rejecting him, she is rejecting the unconscious games he tries to play. Carl Jung described projection as the unconscious transfer of one's shadow onto another. And here lies the root of his fear. For when he sees her detachment, her refusal to collapse under him, he projects his own inadequacy upon her. He tells himself she must be cold, that she must be unfeeling, that she must be incapable of real intimacy. But beneath these stories lies his shadow, the fear that he himself is not enough. The fear that without control he will not be chosen freely, the fear that love, when it cannot be manipulated, will abandon him. And yet, paradoxically, she is the one woman capable of teaching him what love truly is. For she loves not through attachment, but through freedom. She is proof that love does not have to bind in order to endure, that intimacy does not require surrender of the self. In her, love becomes a sacred offering, not a contract. But to receive this offering, he must be willing to abandon the childish need for ownership. And many men are not yet ready for that, so they fear her, demonize her, or reduce her to a symbol of unattainability, anything to avoid facing their own unintegrated shadow. You, listening now, must understand what this means for you. When you stand in your sovereignty, you will unsettle many. You will be misunderstood, accused of arrogance, labeled as distant or too independent. But these are not reflections of your truth. They are reflections of their fear. Their words are the echoes of their own shadows, projected onto the wall of your strength. And if you internalize them, you betray yourself. The sovereign path demands that you let their fear remain theirs. It is not yours to carry. Think of it this way. When a storm rages against a mountain, the mountain does not move. It does not apologize for its height, nor shrink itself for the comfort of the wind. It simply stands, unmoved, grounded in its own being. You too are that mountain, and when men tremble before your height, it is not because you are too much. It is because they have not yet learned to climb. This is why emotional sovereignty is not loneliness, but power. It is the integration of shadow and light, the realization that wholeness was never dependent on another's presence. It is the discovery that love is sweetest when it is freely chosen, not begged for or demanded. And it is the recognition that true intimacy cannot exist until both stand as whole beings, no longer seeking to complete each other, but to meet each other. The Stoics would remind us, no man has the power to make another truly happy or unhappy unless we grant it. The sovereign woman embodies this wisdom. She no longer grants others the keys to her inner world. She may open the gates, but only by choice, never by compulsion. And when she does, her love becomes more radiant, precisely because it is free. But for the man who has not yet faced himself, this freedom feels like rejection. He longs for her to need him, to collapse without him, to validate his fragile ego. Yet when she does not, he is confronted with the uncomfortable truth. He must offer more than control. He must offer depth, presence, and authenticity. And for many, this is the one thing they do not yet know how to give. So he oscillates, drawn to her, then retreating, then drawn again. He circles her like a moth before a flame, mesmerized, yet terrified, because deep down, he knows that stepping fully into her orbit would demand the death of his old self, and ego resists death with everything it has. Still, there are men who dare, men who choose to rise instead of retreat, to integrate their shadows instead of projecting them, to embrace freedom instead of control. These men do not fear her sovereignty. They honor it. They understand that loving a sovereign woman does not diminish them, but expands them, and in that expansion both ascend. But until a man reaches this point, his fear will always whisper to him. It will tell him she is too much, when in truth she is precisely what he has always sought. And here is where the story deepens. For the sovereign woman is not merely an archetype of strength, but an initiation, a living threshold a man must cross if he dares to evolve beyond his primitive patterns. She does not demand that he kneel, she demands that he rise. And this is where the fear is born, because rising requires transformation, and transformation requires the dissolution of the ego. Carl Jung taught that the process of individuation, becoming whole, demands confrontation with the unconscious. This confrontation is terrifying because it forces a man to see not the mask he presents to the world, but the chaos, fragility, and longing he hides beneath it. The sovereign woman accelerates this process. By refusing to collapse into dependency, she strips away the illusions that shield him from himself. Her silence forces him to hear his own thoughts. Her refusal to beg compels him to notice his hunger for validation. Her detachment reveals his addiction to control. In her stillness, his shadow is amplified. You must see what this means. Her sovereignty is not an attack. It is a mirror, and mirrors do not flatter. They reveal. Some men cannot bear the reflection. They flee, telling themselves she is too independent, too distant, too cold. But in truth, it is not her independence that repels them. It is their unwillingness to face what she awakens. This is why her love, when freely given, is so rare, so intoxicating, and so dangerous to those unprepared for it. She does not love from emptiness, but from overflow. She does not love to be filled, but because she is already full. To receive such love is to stand before a river that flows without end, but to stand before it unprepared is to drown. You, as a woman, must understand that sovereignty is not the death of intimacy. It is its rebirth. For true intimacy cannot exist without sovereignty. Without sovereignty, love becomes a bargain. I need you, therefore I keep you. With sovereignty, love becomes a choice. I am whole without you, yet I choose to share myself with you. And it is this choice that terrifies the man who is used to being needed more than he is loved. The Stoics called this the art of mastering the self. Seneca wrote that no man is more unhappy than he who never faces adversity, for he is not permitted to prove himself. The sovereign woman embodies this principle, for she has faced the adversity of solitude and proved herself whole. She does not fear abandonment, for she has already embraced it. She does not fear rejection, for she no longer rejects herself. And when she stands in this power, she forces him to see that he too has yet to face his adversity. He has yet to stand alone without collapsing. He has yet to find wholeness in solitude. And so he trembles, not at her, but at the reflection of what he has not yet become. Do you feel the weight of this truth? To be sovereign is to become both magnet and mirror. Men will be drawn to your fire, yet many will flee its heat. They will tell themselves stories to protect their pride, that you are impossible, that you are unyielding, that no man can satisfy you. But beneath their words lies the deeper truth. They cannot satisfy themselves, and until they do, they cannot stand beside you without crumbling. This is why the sovereign woman does not chase, not out of arrogance but out of wisdom. She knows that the man who flees is not truly fleeing her, he is fleeing his own unhealed self. She knows that the man who remains, trembling yet determined, is the one willing to die to his illusions and be reborn in truth. And here lies the secret he fears most. She does not need him, yet she may still choose him. And that choice, uncoerced, unmanipulated, unbound, is more terrifying than any dependency. For in that moment, he realizes that her love cannot be won by performance or secured by control. It can only be met with authenticity. This is the crucible she offers. Not every man can withstand it. Many will retreat, seeking comfort in women who mirror back the illusions they crave, but some will remain, and those who do will find that in her sovereignty lies not their diminishment, but their liberation. Because to love her is to learn that freedom and intimacy are not enemies, but twins. And so the journey reaches its most profound revelation. For the sovereign woman is not simply an individual standing in her own power. She is an archetype of what it means to be fully alive, fully conscious, fully free. Her existence is a living rebellion against the inherited scripts of dependency and sacrifice that for centuries were laid upon women's shoulders. She has rewritten the story, not with vengeance, but with wisdom, and in doing so she unsettles every man who encounters her. Carl Jung wrote that the greatest burden a child must bear is the unlived life of the parent. Extend this truth further, and you will see why she is feared. For countless generations, women were taught to live half-lives, to bend, to collapse, to seek completion outside themselves. Their unlived lives became the burden of their daughters. But the sovereign woman has broken the chain. She has taken the unlived life of her ancestors and brought it into being. She carries not the weight of submission, but the wings of transformation. And when a man sees her wings, he feels the loss of his own. He senses what he might have been had he embraced his unconscious, had he integrated his shadow, had he learned to love without control. She becomes, for him, not only a partner, but a reminder of his unfinished evolution. And this reminder is both magnet and wound. You must understand, her presence exposes every fragile foundation. Where others collapse under his absence, she thrives. Where others fear abandonment, she stands unafraid. Where others are pulled into emotional chaos, she holds her peace like a shield. This peace is what terrifies him most, because it proves that the one thing he believed gave him power, her dependency, was never real power at all. The Stoics knew this truth deeply. Marcus Aurelius. He reminded himself that no man loses more than the present moment, that nothing external can wound the soul unless the soul consents. The sovereign woman has absorbed this truth into her very being. She has stopped consenting to manipulation. She has stopped surrendering her essence for temporary comfort. She has stopped measuring her worth by whether he stays or leaves, and because of this she is untouchable. Yet do not mistake untouchable for unfeeling. Her strength is not the absence of tenderness, it is the presence of boundaries. She may love with all the depth of the ocean, but her love is not a currency to be traded for crumbs of attention. It is a gift, sacred and freely given, and if it is not honored, she does not diminish herself to beg. She simply withdraws, not in rage, but in silence. And that silence is louder than any scream, because it announces a truth that many men cannot bear. She does not need him to survive. This is why he fears her leaving more than he fears her anger. Anger he can control, manipulate, respond to with gestures of false comfort. But silence, sovereignty, detachment, these leave him powerless. They reveal that she was whole before him and will remain whole after him. They dismantle the illusion that his presence defines her existence. And yet, paradoxically, this same sovereignty is what makes her love so extraordinary. For when she chooses him, she does so not from need, but from freedom. Her presence is not a chain around his neck, but a doorway into deeper truth. To be loved by a sovereign woman is to be seen not for the mask you wear, but for the soul you carry. It is to be chosen by someone who does not need you, and therefore her choice is the purest of all. But few men can hold this gift. Many retreat, preferring the comfort of women who collapse at their absence, because collapse reassures them of their worth. But collapse is not love, it is dependency. Only the man who has faced himself, who has integrated his shadow, who has embraced his own sovereignty, can stand beside her without trembling. For he no longer fears her wings, he spreads his own. And here is where the circle closes. The sovereign woman is not here to diminish men, but to awaken them. She is the storm that tests their roots, the silence that reveals their chaos, the mirror that reflects their shadow. To love her is to step into transformation. To fear her is to remain a prisoner of illusion. And when she finally stands alone, serene, radiant, unshaken, she embodies the deepest truth of all, that freedom is the foundation of love and self-worth is the birthplace of power. The woman who knows her worth doesn't chase, she chooses.